Classic Resident Evil is not just about zombies or scares. It's about tight spaces, fixed camera angles, limited ammo, puzzle-heavy environments, and that constant feeling that you're barely surviving. It's slow, tense, and methodical. These games don't rush you. They make you think, hesitate, and fear every hallway. If you miss that old-school survival horror feeling, these 7 horror games come closer than most modern titles ever do. The first game that truly captures the spirit of classic Resident Evil is Tormented Souls. From the very first minutes, it feels like a love letter to the PS1 era. You explore a dark, abandoned mansion-like hospital filled with locked doors, strange contraptions, and disturbing imagery. The camera is fixed in many areas, forcing you to move carefully because you can't always see what's ahead. Ammo is limited, saving is restricted, and puzzles require actual thought instead of simple marker-based solutions. Combat is clunky in a deliberate way, just like the old Resident Evil games, making every encounter risky. You are encouraged to avoid enemies when possible, not fight everything you see. The atmosphere is heavy, the sound design is unsettling, and the game never holds your hand. It feels like something Capcom could have released in the late 90s. Song of Horror is another game that understands what made classic Resident Evil special, but it adds its own twist. Instead of traditional combat, the game focuses on survival through awareness and decision-making. You explore large, creepy locations with fixed cameras, searching for items, solving puzzles, and avoiding a supernatural presence that reacts to your actions. One of the most interesting mechanics is permadeath. If a character dies, they are gone for good, which adds real tension to every decision you make. Like old Resident Evil games, exploration is slow and careful. You are constantly checking rooms, memorizing layouts, and backtracking with new items. The game relies heavily on atmosphere rather than cheap jump scares, and it respects the player's intelligence. It feels old school in pacing and design, even though it does something new. Damir, 1998, is probably one of the closest things to a classic Resident Evil game that isn't actually made by Capcom. The inspiration is obvious from the start. The setting, enemy design, inventory system, and even the way weapons handle all feel familiar. The game uses limited resources, item management, and puzzle solving in a way that feels very much like Resident Evil 2 or 3 from the PS1 era. You often have to decide whether an enemy is worth the ammo or if it's better to run past them. The environments are full of locked doors, notes, and small details that slowly explain what went wrong. While the game isn't perfect, its heart is clearly in the right place. It focuses on tension over action, which is something many modern horror games forget. Elisa is a lesser-known title, but it might be one of the most faithful recreations of classic survival horror ever made. Visually, it looks like a lost PS1 game, complete with low-poly models and retro-style visuals. But it's not just the look that matters. The gameplay is pure old-school survival horror. Fixed camera angles, tank controls, limited inventory space, and tough puzzles are all here. The setting is strange and unsettling, taking place in a large mansion filled with bizarre enemies and hidden secrets. Like classic Resident Evil, the game rewards patience and planning. Rushing will only get you killed. Every save, every bullet, and every healing item matters. It doesn't try to modernize the experience too much, and that's exactly why it works. Them and Us is another game that clearly understands what fans miss about old Resident Evil. It mixes fixed camera angles with over-the-shoulder views, giving players options while still keeping that classic feeling. The game focuses heavily on exploration, puzzles, and survival rather than non-stop combat. The environments feel isolated and oppressive, with narrow hallways and dark rooms that hide danger. Ammo is scarce and enemies are tough, encouraging careful movement instead of aggression. The story is told through environmental clues and notes, much like the early Resident Evil games. What really stands out is how the game embraces slowness. It's not afraid to let the player feel uncomfortable and vulnerable for long stretches of time. Obscure may not be as scary as some of the other games on this list, but it captures a very specific era of survival horror. Released in the early 2000s, it feels like a bridge between classic Resident Evil and more modern horror games. Set in a high school, the game focuses on exploration, puzzle solving, and managing limited resources. The camera angles are often fixed, and the environments are designed to feel claustrophobic and unsafe. One unique feature, is the ability to control multiple characters, each with different abilities, which adds strategy to exploration and combat. Signalis is a more modern game, but its design is deeply rooted in classic survival horror, from its camera angles to its inventory management. It clearly draws inspiration from early Resident Evil and Silent Hill. The game limits how much you can carry, forcing you to plan your routes and make tough decisions about what to bring with you. Combat is dangerous and often better avoided, just like in the old days. The environments are eerie, lonely, and filled with unsettling imagery. The game also uses puzzles that require observation and memory instead of simple hints. While the story is more abstract, the gameplay loop feels very familiar to anyone who grew up with classic survival horror games. It respects the player and doesn't over-explain itself. What all these games have in common is that they understand fear comes from limitation. Limited ammo, limited saves, limited vision, and limited information.